Welcome everybody to our talk today about degenerative conditions. Today we're talking about specifically osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis. All right, so what is osteoarthritis? This is the most common form of arthritis that is diagnosed. It is also known as the wear or tear condition or the degenerative joint disease. What we see is that osteoarthritis typically occurs in our hands, hips, and knees. And what's happening is that these joints are frequently used, right? And there's cartilage at the end of our bones. And what's happening is that this cartilage starts to break down over time. So then we have bone on bone. And that can start to change the shape of our bones, which can lead to discomfort, pain, and eventually potentially a replacement if it's not maintained and taken care of. So what are some signs and symptoms that we see for osteoarthritis? Joint stiffness, joint pain, swelling of the joints. If you have any clicking or cracking sounds when you're walking around or using your hands, feet, ankles, hips, and knees. But with all of that being said, it's important to say that not everyone with osteoarthritis is going to feel pain, so you might not be aware of it. Typically, pain is something that if you experience joint pain over time, you might go to your doctor and be like, hey, I'm having some joint pain, and then they would do some testing to figure out if it is osteoarthritis. But if you're not experiencing pain, then it's really hard for you to know, hey, I'm having some joint issues, and so I need to go to the doctor. And then that's when you can start to actually have worse, like bone shifting and changing, and so that can actually be worse. So anyways, with all that being said, everyone experiences symptoms differently. If you may have more swelling, you may have more pain, just depends. Here's another just image of different symptoms that you may see, but definitely symptoms to not ignore. Again, if you have pain in your joints for a long period of time, that's something to report to your doctor. If you're noticing that you're having reduced flexibility in your joints and you're having a hard time just getting that full range of motion, something to note. And some swelling, I already mentioned this, and also bone spurs too. So what are the risk factors for osteoarthritis? What we see, number one, is overuse. And by this, I mean if you are constantly bending over and you're having to use your hips and your knees, maybe when you were a kid or young adult, you played sports like football and you're having to really put a lot of pressure on your knees over a long period of time. That can lead to some cartilage breakdown later in life. Age also, so again, this may increase with age, your chances of developing osteoarthritis, and that is simply just because it is called the wear and tear. So just over time, just using our joints, that can cause some wear and tear. Sex, so this is more common in men, osteoarthritis, before the age of 45, and that's generally because of sports injuries, something like that. But later on, after 50, women are more likely to be diagnosed. And this is because post-menopause, our hormones are changing, and so this can increase our chances of developing osteoarthritis. Another thing to note is obesity. So with increased weight, that's going to add more stress onto our joints over time. Genetics, if you do have a loved one, a close relative who developed osteoarthritis, you have an increased likelihood of developing it also. That does not mean you're going to get it by any means, but there is a correlation there. If you developed osteoarthritis in a different location in your body, so if you had it in your right knee, you have an increased chance of developing it in your left knee or your right hip. As well as race. So what we find, or what research tells us, is that some Asian populations present with a decreased risk of osteoarthritis. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but that's what the research tells us. Okay, so what we find too is that, again, we talked about the hands and how our hands can develop osteoarthritis. This is more common in postmenopausal women. Genetics does play a small role in this, so it can increase your risk of developing osteoarthritis in your hands. And what we see is we develop some like bony kind of knobs in the joints of our fingers, and that looks like what osteoarthritis is. So if we have it at our DIP, which is our distal interphalangeal joint, then this can be called Heberdine's node. If we have it of our PIP, our proximal interphalangeal joint, then that's called Bouchard's node. So a couple different definitions there and things to note. If you do have some increased swelling at your fingertips, it potentially could be osteoarthritis. But you can maintain it with medication and talking to a doctor, so something to note. All right, so now we have our knees. This is a really common area where we experience osteoarthritis over time. And what it looks like is you may experience stiffness, swelling, or pain. And again, just different per person. This may increase your difficulty with walking because we're having that bone-on-bone action, which is just painful or definitely discomforting. It can impact our ability to transition out of a toilet, getting dressed, into the car, bathtub. It can really impact our daily functions because we're experiencing discomfort at our knees. All right, now our hips. Again, this is also another common site of osteoarthritis. Kind of similar symptoms. You may experience stiffness, swelling, or pain, and that pain can happen in multiple areas. You could experience it in your groin, your inner thigh, or even your knees. It can go radiate down your knees if you're experiencing hip pain too. What this can impact is quite a few activities. This may increase difficulty with moving in general or just bending down, which is going to make it harder to get dressed on our own, perform toileting. Again, those transitions out of chairs into bathtubs and cars. Lastly, we have our spine. So this can be experienced in our neck and our low back, really anywhere along the spine. And what's happening again is that cartilage is kind of breaking down, so we can start developing bone spurs in our spine due to osteoarthritis. When with all of that, you can start having some pressure build up on our nerves, which can lead to weakness and tingling in our fingertips and our legs. What this does over time is it can decrease your range of motion and your activity tolerance during things that you have to do on a daily basis. Just taking care of yourself, doing things around the house, it can make it harder to do those things because you're experiencing that numbness and tingling or even pain. Okay, so for diagnosing osteoarthritis, there really is not a single test to diagnose osteoarthritis. What will happen is that you'll go to a doctor, discuss your medical history with a primary care physician. And by doing that, you're going to report your family history. Did you have a loved one who had osteoarthritis? What are your current symptoms? Are you experiencing joint pain? Do you have swelling or stiffness? What are the medications that you're currently taking? And then after you reported your medical history, the doctor will do some physical exams, check your reflexes, check your joints, your range of motion, maybe some muscle testing. And then if we continue on, maybe do some imaging, perform some x-rays, which will help look at bone spurs, any bone damage itself, or maybe an MRI to check the damage to the soft tissue around the joint. A couple other things they can do is run some blood tests and joint fluid tests to see if it really is osteoarthritis or if it's something else going on that's causing the pain. So in the United States, this is very common, actually. So about 32 million people in America are affected by osteoarthritis specifically, with 1 in 4 adults having diagnosed arthritis. This could be rheumatoid or osteoarthritis. Arthritis is more common in women, especially after age 50, and that's compared to men. And why that is probably a couple of reasons. Again, hormonal changes, postmenopause, as well as our bones typically are more frail than men, as well as weaker muscles or, there's that kind of thing. So what's happening is that we're having to overcompensate and use our joints more. So we're putting more pressure on our joints long term, which can then lead to arthritis. The prevalence of arthritis is highest among sedentary adults because we're not using our joints and our muscles and our bones the way we should. So we're just, again, adding more pressure onto our joints over time. What we expect to see is that by 2040, around 78 million people, that's a huge jump, people age 18 and older will have diagnosed arthritis. And this is for a couple of reasons. One, the population is just getting older in general. Two, I'm thinking that maybe texting and using technology might have a role in that, especially using our keyboard all day, using our thumbs all day for texting. So who knows, probably a couple of reasons. That's just my theory. So how can we treat and manage osteoarthritis? Well, we have a couple of things we're going to talk about today. Number one being our self-management, taking care of ourselves. Osteoarthritis, again, that can lead to a lot of pain in our joints, which is going to impact our ability to do things that we find meaningful. So what can we do? One, we can learn how to better manage our pain. What's going to work for us? So it's using a hot pack, cold pack, some modalities help us, some medications, maybe working out, doing yoga. That might help to manage pain. Remembering it's important to participate in meaningful activities. So what can you do that day that's going to be beneficial to you and boost your mood? And remembering to spend time with your family and friends, even though you might be in pain, just even having some support from your loved ones, as well as using them to help you do tasks around the home if you're experiencing pain is definitely a bonus. Talk about your stress. What can you do to help with stress management? Practicing mindfulness and relaxation techniques on a daily basis. And how can we control our health? That is a big stress, right? So talking to your primary care physician, discussing the side effects of your medication, figuring out what works for you and how to manage your osteoarthritis. Number 2, be active. So physical activity is one of the best things that you can do, and it's a really effective non-pharmacological approach to relieve pain. And what being physically active does is, one, it helps to relieve pain. It improves our function overall by making our muscles stronger, using our bones. Then we can start to support our joints and decrease the likelihood of developing osteoarthritis. Reducing our risk of chronic disease development. It helps to improve our mood, makes us feel good. It helps us sleep better, which reduces fatigue, and also just helps improve our quality of life in general. Okay, so what are some tips that we should be considering when being physically active? Number 1, it's really important to note that some physical activity is better than none. So even just doing a little bit and building up over time will be helpful. So here are some tips they're called SMART tips to help you exercise safely if you are experiencing osteoarthritis. Number 1, start low, go slow. So keep it simple, build up over time, do what works best for you. You don't want to overdo it and lead to more pain the next day. 2, modifying your activities when your symptoms increase. So if you're experiencing a lot of swelling that day, then change it up. You don't want to do something that's going to hurt your knees even more. Do activities that are joint friendly. So engaging in walking, swimming, and bicycling, those are all things that are helpful on your joints. Recognizing a safe place and ways to stay active. And what I mean by that is if you are having a hard time getting into physical activity, and coming to a gym like TriFitness gym is something that I would encourage, because here we have certified trainers who can help you to modify the activity and make you feel safe and feel good. And lastly, talk to a healthcare professional if you're experiencing ongoing pain, and that if your joint pain is causing you to be unable to do things that you find meaningful. So breaking it down, the types of exercise that are really important. Number 1, we have aerobic exercise. So what's recommended is engaging in 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise. And if you want to go up the next level, 75 minutes of vigorous intensity exercise. And so again, some examples of low impact aerobic exercise include cycling, walking, and swimming. For frequency, it's best to be active and incorporate aerobic exercise at least 3 to 4 days per week. The intensity, moderate intensity, the time about 30 to 60 minutes a day, and the type, just do something that you enjoy and that's joint friendly. Some cautions to be thinking about when engaging aerobic exercise. Start with shorter sessions. If you are experiencing a lot of joint pain, do 10 to 15 minutes and build up over time. You don't want to go too hard one day and not be able to move the next day. You should expect some discomfort, but not pain. We don't want to experience pain. Pain is a no-go. You should listen to your body. But discomfort is okay. The total exercise time is more important than the intensity. So even if you're not doing vigorous exercise, that's okay. Just do what you can for at least 30 minutes, get what you can do, take breaks as needed. That's the most beneficial part. Alternate types of activities and exercises that you do. So don't consistently do the same exercise every single day, because that can put more wear and tear. Kind of mix it up, focus on different parts of the body, and change it up to keep it fresh too and keep you motivated. And lastly, drink plenty of fluids. For resistance training exercise, this is definitely beneficial when it comes to osteoarthritis, because it helps to strengthen our muscles around the joint and support our joint. So that way our joint's having to do less work. So what happens is that being active, do some strength training, helps to reduce risk of injury as well as prevent joint damage. And it will improve your function overall and ability to do things on your own. We should be doing resistance training at least 2 to 3 days a week with light to moderate intensity. And what I mean by that is like 10 to 20 repetitions. The time that you should be doing it, about 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetitions. Types of resistance training we do, definitely focus on all muscle groups. You can use free weights, resistance bands, body weight, suspension, everything that they have here at the gym that y'all are currently doing in your workouts. Keep it up. Some things to think about with resistance training: avoid holding your breath when lifting. Holding your breath can actually change your blood pressure, which we really don't want to happen long term. So make sure you're keep it on breathing. Again, avoiding those repetitive exercises. Avoid too much twisting, rapid, uncontrolled movements. We want to protect our joints as much as we can. Avoid locking your joints. So don't go straight and lock into our joints over time. That can put a lot of pressure on our joints. And with that being said, also avoid hyperextension of our joints. Especially in women, we see hypermobility a lot. So making sure we're kind of avoiding going to that hyperextension because that can do more damage over time. Lastly, we have flexibility. Flexibility is important. We should do that daily. It helps to improve our range of motion and overall improve our relaxation and help with pain. The only thing to note really is just avoid overstretching because we don't want to be hypermobile because that can make our joints a little too loosey-goosey and can lead to damage potentially over time. So don't overdo it, but definitely stretch daily, holding a stretch for like 10 to 15 seconds, maybe up to 30 seconds max. But yeah, stretch every part of your body that feels good because it can help you to feel good after you work out. Okay, a couple of things to say. If you are experiencing any of the following, then definitely see a doctor. If you have pain that is stabbing, sharp, or constant, that is not normal. Definitely see a doctor about it because that can impact what you're doing on a daily basis. If you experience pain that lasts longer than 2 to 3 hours post-exercise, that's not what we want either. Discomfort, again, is okay, but not the pain. Pain or swelling that does not improve with medication, rest, or modalities. So using a cold pack, making sure we're resting, but if you are experiencing pain and swelling and it's not going away, then that's a concern. If you're continuing to experience increase in swelling of joints, we don't want that either. And if your joints are hot or red to the touch, definitely something to note. Okay, last couple of things. We have weight management. So being overweight does put stress on your joints. In fact, 1 pound of weight puts 4 pounds of pressure on your knees. So it's definitely important to maintain a healthy weight to help reduce that stress on your joints over time. Joint protection principles. So engaging activities that are joint friendly, again, walking, bicycling, and swimming. And using your large joints during functional activities. So like going to the grocery store, maybe use a bag at your shoulder or carrying groceries inside the house. Using your groceries at your shoulder instead of your hands is better because our hands aren't meant to hold that much weight. And lastly, just avoiding rapid, uncontrolled movements. Keep it slow and low and maintain your proper body mechanics. That way we're protecting our joints at all costs. And if all else fails, if you've been active, you've helped to maintain your weight, you've been practicing joint protection principles, then talk to a doctor if pain is not going away. They might be prescribing medications like oral pain relievers, topical creams. They may give an orthotic that's fitted to you to help stabilize the joint that's experiencing pain. And if all else fails, surgery could potentially happen, having a partial or total knee replacement. Again, we don't want that to happen, but that is a last resort if everything else we've talked about has not worked to help with the osteoarthritis. So that was it. Here are all my references. And if you want to go check out some information about joint protection principles, just go back to our YouTube page and we have another PowerPoint about that. All right, thank you all very much.